I like to do. Let's talk about the Framer Motion. So Framer Motion is a popular open source library for React.js that allows developer to create animations and transitions easily. It provides a set of tools and APIs to animate component, enabling smooth and high performance animation with minimal effort. So that's just a basic definition of what a Framer Motion is. Now let's talk about what's the difference between Framer in Framer Motion. So a framer is a design tool that allow you to create a high fidelity prototypes and interactive design. On the other hand, a Framer Motion is a library specifically for React.js that enable developer to create smooth animation and transitions. Now the big question is, why should I even care about learning Framer Motion? If I can do my transition and also animation in CSS, why should I even bother learning Framer Motion? And now let's talk about the CSS animation pros and also CSS animation cons. Then we're going to be also discussing the Framer Motion pros and also the Framer Motion cons. CSS is great for simple hover effects, transitions between states, or animation that doesn't require a complex logic. CSS animation are typically very performant and can leverage GPU acceleration. You also don't need to install some sort of a third-party library for that. You can totally go ahead and just write your code and it will work totally fine. So that's just the pros of what a CSS animations and transitions is. Now let's talk about the cons. They are more challenging to manage complex animation, such as coordinating multiple elements or responding to the user interaction beyond the simple events. Animating properties based on a component state can be also cumbersome in a CSS animation. So that's just the pros and cons of a CSS animation. And now let's talk about the pros and also the cons of a Framer Motion. So let's just start from the pros. So Framer Motion offers advanced capabilities like drag, gesture, and layout animation, which can be hard to achieve with a pure CSS. And also it allows us to integrate seamlessly with React component model, allowing for easy management of state-driven animation. It makes it easy to define and switch between different animation state. And now let's talk about the cons of the Framer Motion. So it might take some time to get familiar with the APIs and stuff. The learning curve can be a bit difficult sometimes, but not all the times. And you would also need to install a third-party package, which is called the Framer Motion package, which we're going to be seeing in a few seconds. So yeah, that's just the only cons about the Framer Motion. And welcome to the world of animation and Framer Motion. Let me show you the difference between Framer and Framer Motion in action. So here you can see I am now inside the framer.com/motion right here, and it's going to bring us to the Framer Motion documentation, which is something that we want, and here we're going to be spending a lot of time. But now if I only remove this motion and if I hit enter right now, it's going to bring us to something called the Framer. Okay, so here you can see you can learn more about that if you wanted to, which is basically a design tool, and you can do a prototyping and all of that kind of stuff, which is something which we are not going to be doing in this course. Okay, so yeah, this is a Framer website, and now if you want to go into the Framer Motion documentation, you're going to have to specify the motion right here. And if you hit enter, so it's going to bring us to this Framer Motion documentation right here. Okay, so time to make a setup for our coding journey. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my terminal right here, and then I'm going to make it a bit bigger so that you guys can see everything a bit better, like so. Now I'll use npm create with at latest, and here I'll give it the name of like Framer Motion demos or something like that. I'll choose React.js and also TypeScript. Now I'll go into the Framer Motion, and now let's just install every single thing inside there. So I'll use like npm i to install all of the packages. Now that's done, I'm gonna also install the Framer Motion, so I'll just click on the getting started, and I'm going to copy this command from there. And now let me just place this command right here and hit enter, so it's going to install that. While it's doing that, I'm going to also go into the tailwindcss.com, click on the getting started. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be using Tailwind CSS or not, but yeah, I will still provide this. So I'll choose the wheat, and then I'm going to copy this command, and let's just place it right here. So it's going to install Tailwind CSS inside my project. So I'll also copy this command or this content from here, and I'm gonna hit enter, so it's gonna initialize my Tailwind CSS. Let's just open our VS Code right here, and this is how it looks like. So I'll just remove that. I'm gonna also remove the public folder. Let's just go into the src, remove the assets, the app.css, and also remove every single thing from the app. And I'm gonna be using my RAFC inside there, save my file. Let's go into this Tailwind config file, and I'm gonna replace it with this new content, and I'm gonna also copy these components from there. So let's just go into the index.css file and replace it right here. Okay, so finally I'm gonna have to run there, but I'm gonna copy this line of code and place there right here with this new one. So let's just save our file, and I'm gonna be using npm run dev, so it's gonna run there inside my server. So I'll use like localhost And here you can see we are now getting our hello world, which is looking cool. But also I want to provide more styling to this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my index.css file and place it right here, save my file. Let's just go back, and here you can see we are now selecting every single thing, providing a padding of 0 and margin of 0. Box sizing will be set to border box. Then we are selecting the body, changing the background color, also changing the text color, and centering out every single thing. And then we have our box, and this box have the width of 300 and also the height of 300. And we have a border pixel or border radius of 100%, and we are also changing the background color of that. So this is how currently things looks like, and that was just a simple setup. Now let me show you the basics of animation. I'm not going to be writing a lot of code, and you can think about this as just like the hello world program in the Framer Motion. So I'm going to make things side by side like so. So I'll just remove that and also remove that one and make things side by side. Remove that, zoom in a bit so you guys can see everything a bit better. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to import something from the Framer Motion, which is called the motion. From where? From the Framer Motion. So that's going to be the first thing. Next, we have to create some sort of a div. Not this div, but we have to create them manually. And inside there, we're going to be using something called the motion.div. I'm going to also close it. You can close your div like this, but I'm not going to close my div like so. Okay, so I'll just close it like a self-closing tag. I'm going to also provide the class name of box today, and remember this box is coming from this CSS. As you can see, if I go into this index.css, so here you can see we have this box, and we are now providing the styling today. Okay, so yeah, we can now totally see our circle, and now I'm going to use like animate prop, and here inside this animate prop, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to provide the x, and the x will be set to 20. Okay, so if I save that, or let me just change that to 100, and here you can see we're now animating this ball. So what is this motion which we are now importing from the Framer Motion, and what is this animate prop? So now let me just explain that in the diagrams. Let's talk about that motion thing which we just import from the Framer Motion. So motion is an object that provides a set of component and hooks for creating animation and transitions in React applications. So that's just a theory, but now let's just explore that a bit more. So when we use the motion dot element, and that element can be basically any HTML element. You can specify motion dot h1, h2, or ul, li, span, image, div, article, aside, section, or text area, inputs, or anything that you prefer. So you're going to be using that like this. First of all, you're going to be importing the motion, then you're going to be using motion dot, and then you're going to be using the element name. So basically we are indicating that we want to animate that specific HTML element. Framer Motion then provides additional props and features to facilitate those animations, such as the initial prop, animate prop, and also the exit prop, allowing for more powerful and customizable animation. Okay, so we just mentioned these three things like animate and also the initial and also the exit prop. So I want to discuss that a bit more. Let's talk about the initial prop. So the initial prop is used to define the initial state of an animated component before it enters the DOM. It specifies how the element should appear when it first renders. So that was just the initial prop, and now let's talk about the main part, which is called the animate prop. So the animate prop is used to create an animation for the component. It lets you set the target value for the different CSS properties, making it easy to have smooth changes when the component state updates. That was the animate prop, and now let's talk about the final, not a final, but now let's talk about yet another most useful one, which is called the exit prop. So the exit prop is used to define the animation that occurs when the component is removed from the React tree. This is particularly useful for creating an animation when the elements are unmounted or removed from the DOM, enhancing the user experience by visually indicating that something has disappeared. And now we are going to be covering the first part of our animation, which is called the transformations. So transformation allow you to change the shape, size, and position of the element on the web page. I know that was a lot of theory, but now let's get into the code, and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's talk about the transformation. And I know there was a lot of theory, so now let's just implement all of that theory in action. So anytime you want to work with the Framer Motion, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. The first thing that you have to keep in mind is that you're going to have to import this motion object from the Framer Motion, and then you have to tell the Framer Motion that which element or which specific HTML element you want to animate. So this is how we are going to be telling our Framer Motion that we want to animate this specific div. Okay, so now Framer Motion will give us a superpower to animate that div. So the first superpower it will give us is the animate prop. So it's gonna take a CSS properties and which will allows us to animate our div. So I'll just use like translate property right here. So if I just use like translate, translate, And now if I hit enter, I can also use like translate on the x-axis and also on the y-axis like 200 pixel. And as soon as I save my file, here you can see it's gonna move my element. I can also write like translate on the x-axis. So if I save my file, it's gonna move my element on the x-axis. I can also push that on the y-axis. So here you can see it's gonna push that from top to bottom. So we are not gonna be writing our code like this, because in the Framer Motion there are a lot of shortcuts. Okay, so instead of using like translate on the x-axis and translate on the y-axis, we are allowed to do that if you want to do that, but we don't have to do that. Okay, so let's suppose if you want to use like the translate on the x-axis, we just have to write like x. So as soon as we write x, then we can specify like how much we want to move our element. So I'll just write like not 200 but 100 pixel. And now if I save my file, so it's going to move that 100 right here. I can also change that to 200 and it's going to push that right here on the 200. We are also not limited to only writing a x. Instead of writing a translate on the y-axis, we can only use the y. Okay, so if I change that to like 100 and save my file, so it's going to push that down right here. I can also write like 200 and here you can see it's going to push that a bit more. And once again, we are not limited to just provide these properties. We can also use our own custom CSS, pixel, rems, percent, and all of that kind of good stuff. So I can use like 100 pixel, save my file, so it's going to push that right here. I can also use like 10 rems or something like that, save my file, so it's going to push it a bit more. And I can also use like, you know what, 80%. This is right, 80%. It's going to also work exactly the same. So that was it about the translate on the x-axis and translate on the y-axis. Now let's talk about the rotation. So to work with the rotation, first of all, we're going to have to go into the index.css file and we have to comment this border radius right here from this box. So now if I save my file, and by the way, if you are wondering, here is the index.css file. Okay, so now we can totally rotate our element. So to rotate them, we have a few properties. Like the first property we have is a rotate on the x-axis, then we have to specify the values in the degrees. So I can just write like 60 degree. Let me just write a 60 degree right here, save my file, and it's gonna rotate my element on the x-axis 60 degree. I can also change that to like 20 degree. It's gonna also rotate there as a 20 degree, and I can also change that to like 70 degree, and it will work exactly the same. We are not only limited to work with the x-axis, we can also use the y-axis, and I can just write like 60 degree, save my file, and it's going to rotate my element on the y-axis 60 degree. I can also change that to 20, and this is how it will look like. In some situation, we would also want to use one value for the x-axis and also for the y-axis. So for that, we can use just a shorthand, which is called the rotate property. So I'll just use like 60 degrees, save my file. It's gonna flip it up. And also we can provide 20 degree, we can use any kind of value. So that was the rotation and also the transformation or a translate value. Let's talk about the scaling. So we can also scale our element. You know what, first of all, let me just show you something. Here you can see if you go ahead and go to our index.css, now we are providing the width of 300 and also the height of 300 to our specific box, which means like we are now using the scale of 1. Okay, so if I just write like scale of 1, it will look exactly the same. But if I change that to 2, so which means like we are now duplicating or multiplying this value. Like here you can see this is a 300, it's going to make it as a 600 and also make the height as a 600. Okay, so in some situation we would want to increase the size of that. So for that we can just use like scale, then we can just specify 2, which means like we want this element to scale up twice. So now if I save my file and boom. Okay, so that was the scale property. We can also just change the one direction, like on the x-axis. If I save my file, so it's going to only change the on the x-axis. We can also change that on the y-axis, and this is how it will look like. And we can also provide like obviously 4 and 5 and stuff like that. Bang, this is looking huge. So that was it about for the x, y, rotate x, rotate y, rotate, scale x, scale y, and just a scale property. Let's talk about the final one, which is called the skew. So skew will allows us to tilt our element. Okay, so we can also skew there on the x-axis. Let me just write like skew on the x-axis of 20, and as soon as I do that and save my file, and here you can see it's gonna tilt my element as 20 degrees. We can also change the direction to the y-axis like so, save my file, and it's gonna tilt or skew there on the y-axis as 20. So I can also change that to like 40, and this is how it will look like. and we can also like obviously use the shorthand which is called the skew. Save my file, and this is how it will look like. We can also change the value of that to 20 and bang. Okay, so in this section we learn all of their properties. Let me just show you there. So we learn about the, we learn about the animate, and we also learn about the motion, motion dot and specific element, and we learn about the x-axis, the one. I know that you like transformation, but now I'm going to tell you about yet another property which will make you fall in love with itself. And that property is called the transition. So let's talk about it. What are transitions and why you should even care about them? So transitions are the effect that control how the animation happens, and you can think about them as the rules of how the element moves or changes. So there are a few properties about the transitions which is called the duration, easing, and the delay. So let's talk about the first one, which is called the duration. So duration simply means that how long the animation will take, and easing simply means the speed curve of the animation, like it will start from slow and it will go fast, or it will go fast and then it will stop slow, and something like that. Then we have a delay, and delay just simply means how long we have to wait before starting the animation. So yeah, that was just the basic theory about the transitions, and now let's just discuss that in action. So let's talk about the transitions in action. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to uncomment this line of code, and now we have to provide our initial state, and we just saw initial state in the diagrams, but this is the first time that we are using that. So basically this is going to be the initial state or the starting point of our animation. So we want our animation to start from 0, and then we want to animate that to the x-axis 100 pixels. So now if I save my file, here you can see our animation will start from 0, and then it will go to 100 pixel on the x-axis. So which is cool and everything, but now you want to control the behavior of this animation. So how are we going to be controlling that? So to control that, we have another prop which is called, you guessed it, transition. Okay, so I'll use the transitions right here, and inside this transition prop we can provide the delay, duration, and also the easing. So now in this case I'll just provide like the delay. Alright, like delay like so, and delay will be set to maybe 2 seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna save my file, and now let me just refresh there. So we have to wait 2 seconds, like 1 and 2, then it will start working. So you know what, let me just refresh there. 1, 2, bang. Okay, so this is the delay, like how long we have to wait before starting the animation. Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate this line of code, I'm gonna comment this line out, and I can also set there to like 5 seconds or something like that. Now let me just refresh there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and bang. So now it will take like 5 seconds. So that was delay, but I'm gonna also duplicate there and change that to something called the duration. And this is by far one of my favorite property, and we can provide a seconds to that, like how long our animation will take. So I'll just provide like 2 seconds. And now if I just refresh there, and bang, this is super smooth. You know, I'm gonna change that to 200. And now let me just refresh there, and here you can see this is how it will look like. So now our animation will take 2 seconds to complete. I can also change that to like 5 seconds, and now let's just refresh there, and it will take 5 seconds to complete now. So this is also cool, but we can also change the behavior of there a bit more. Okay, so now let me just duplicate this line of code and comment that one out. So I can also provide the easing, and we have a lot of easing. So we have anticipate, back in and out, circle in and out, circle out, and ease in and out, and linear, and there are a lot of them. So I'm going to only choose this ease in and out. I'm going to save my file. Now let me just refresh there. So it's going to start slow, and then it will go a bit fast. Let me just refresh there once again. Okay, so it's going to start slow, then it will go a bit fast. I'm going to change that to like maybe 2 seconds so that you guys can see everything a bit better. And yep, we also have the ease. So if I change that to ease, so everything will go as a ease. So you know what, let me just change that to linear. Now if I save my file, and here you can see it will go linearly. So yeah, we have these few transition properties. We have a delay, duration, and also the easing. Welcome to one of my favorite topic in this entire course, which is called the keyframes. So what are keyframes and why you should even care about that? So keyframes allow you to create more complex animation by specifying multiple points in animation sequence. Instead of just animating from one state to another, we can define several intermediate states, or you can also say frames, to control the animation more precisely. And I know that's a complex definition to say, but to put them in more simple terms, you can think about the keyframes is like splitting or dividing animation into multiple frames or multiple parts. So that's just as simple as that. So how the syntax will look like? This is how the syntax will look like. So first of all, we are going to be using the array, and inside this array, we are going to be providing the starting point and then the ending point, and we can provide as many as we want. So that was just a theory about the keyframes. And now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Okay, so now let's just use the keyframes in action. So I'll use the animate prop once again, and inside this animate prop, we're going to be doing a lot of magic. So first of all, we want to scale up this ball. So I'll use like scale, and here, once again, anytime you want to use the keyframes, so the first thing that you have to do is that you have to write the array, and inside this array, you have to specify the starting point and then the ending point. So I'll use like start from 1, like the scale of 1. Then go to 2. Okay, so if I just write there and save my file, here you can see it's going to start from 1, then it's going to go to 2. And now I'm going to also provide the transitions. So I'll write like transitions, and here for the transition, I'm going to provide a duration of like maybe 5 seconds or something like that. Save my file, and now let me just refresh there. It's going to start very slow from the 1 scale, then it will go to 2 scale. And now let me just refresh there. Here you can see it's going to start from the 1 scale, and then it will go to 2 scale. Now I can also specify, and we can also tell it that we have to start from 2 and then we have to go to 3. Okay, and we can also provide more than this. So I'll just use like, then start from there 3, then start from the 4, then go to 3, and we can also go backward, then start from the 3, then go to 2, then start from the 2, then go to 1. Okay, so I know there was a lot of saying, so let's just save our file and refresh there. So it's going to start from 1, then it's going to go to 2, then it's going to go to 2 once again, then it will eventually go to 3 and 4, and then it will start from the 4, then it will go to 3, then it will go to 2, and finally it will reach to the 1, and this is how it looks like. So you know what, let me just play this animation once again. I'm gonna just refresh there. Bang, 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 bang. So that was it about for the scaling, but we are not only limited to provide the scaling, we can also provide the rotation if you wanted to. But for the rotation, you guessed it, we're gonna have to comment this line out, and we can use like rotate, and here we have to specify our keyframes. So we want our rotation to start from the 0 degree, and then it should go to the 0 degree, then it should go to the 270 degree, and then 270 degree once again, and then finally go to the 0 point. Okay, so if I save my file, and now let me just refresh there, here you can see it's going to start from 0 0, then it will rotate there to 270, and then it will reverse it back to 270, and finally it's going to make it 0. So we can rotate the what do we call, we can also provide a keyframe for the rotation, but we can also provide the border. So we are now at the point of the course where I'm going to give you the examples. Now I know a lot of people will ask me, Hussein, why didn't you give us this example in the transformation and also in the transition section? And the answer is obvious. Because you guys already know what a transition and also a transformation is from CSS. But now in Framer Motion, we have this new concept of keyframe. So I'm going to give you a few examples of there. If you don't care about the examples, you can totally go ahead and skip this example section. So I'm going to create a components folder, and inside there I'm going to create my pulsing button.tsx file. Let's just hit enter. What the hell did I just do? God damn it. Remove there, and create a file with the name of pulsing button.tsx and create my RAFCE inside there. Save my file, and let's just try to animate that. But before I do, here's a question for you. Now I'm using a frame on motion. What's going to be the first step that I have to do? And 3, 2, 1. And the answer is we're going to have to import the, what do we call it, the motion object. Come on. Oh my god. Motion object from where? From the frame on motion. That's going to be the first thing that we have to do. Next, we have to tell our frame on motion that we want to animate that specific thing. Okay, so I'll just remove the, or let me just select and remove both of them. And I'm going to use like motion.button right here. And now let's just start working on our button. I'll use my click me as a label for that. And now if I save my file, I'm going to go ahead and go to, and let's just remove my action and create my pulsing PLUSING pulsing button and register this component right here. Remove this action from there. You're now getting our cute little click me button or something like that. Okay, so let's just refresh that. It's not doing anything, but now we have to start working on that. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to specify our animate prop. Or you know what, let me just provide a bit of styling to that so that we can see what are we working on. So I'll just provide like pairing for the x-axis of 4, pairing for the y-axis of 2, text will be set to totally white, background will be blue of 500, and totally rounded, outline will be, come on, outline will be set to none. If I save my file, so this is how my button looks like, and now it's time to animate that. So to animate that, I'm gonna go ahead, provide a bit of spacing to that, and provide my animate prop right here. For this animate prop, I'm gonna use my keyframe, so I'll just provide a scale, and the scale starting from the 1, then go to 1.1, and then go back to the 1. Okay, so that's gonna be it for the scaling. I'm gonna also change the background color of the, and the background color will be set to these colors. So first of all, you will have this color, then it will go to this color, and then it will go back to that color. Okay, so now if I save my file, here you can see we are now getting this animation. It's going to provide just a bit of opacity to that, then it will go back to its existing color. So now let me just provide duration, and duration will be set to 0.8, and also I want to provide a bit of easing, and ease will be set to ease in and out, and also I want to use my repeat. I also forgot to tell you the repeat, but yeah, we can also repeat our properties, and I'm going to set that to infinite. There we go. So now if I save my file, let's just save our file, go back a little bit. This is how the code will look like, and this is how the animation will look like. Okay, so here you can see we are now getting this amazing button, and that was example number 1. And basically we only have to write this amount of code to create this amazing animation by using the frame on motion. So that was example number 1. Let me give you one more example, which is what do we call it? Bouncing loader.tsx. Yes, I'll use my RAFCE inside there. Go to my app and comment this line out. I'm going to be using my bouncing loader, import that right here, save my file, and this is how it looks like right here. Obviously the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from the frame on motion like so. Next we have to provide a bit of styling today, so I'll just use like flex and justify will be set to center, items will be set to center, and space on the x-axis will be set to 2. Okay, so now inside this div I want to just iterate over through a lot of data so we can get overloaded. So I'll just use like come on, and then I'm going to use my array, and here we only have to specify 3 items, and then we have to iterate over through that items. Okay, so I'll use like map method, and here we are not interested in anything, we are only interested in the index. Okay, so now inside there, let's just go back. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to use our motion.div, or you know what, I'm not going to close there like this way. I'm going to close there as a self-closing tag. Now we have to specify our animation right here. So first of all, we have to take care of the key prop, and this is how we are going to be taking care of that. We also have to just provide a bit of styling today. So I'll use like width of 4, and also the height will be set to 4. The background will be set to totally teal 500. Now underneath that, this is how we are going to be animating our stuff. You know, let me just save my file. So here you can see it's going to give us there 3 dots, and that dots are coming from this array right here. We can also change that to like I don't know, maybe 5 or something like that. Now it's going to give us that 5 but I only want to get these 3. So now finally we have to animate these balls right here. Okay, so I'll use like my animate prop, and inside this animate prop we have to provide the y-axis, and for the y-axis we want to start our animation from 0, and we want to go to -50 and then 0 once again. Okay, so as soon as I do that, here you can see all of them are now bouncing, but I can also provide the transition, so I'll use like transitions, and here inside this transition, what do you want to do? I want to provide a bit of duration, and it is going to take like 0.6 seconds. We also want to provide the easing, and the easing will be ease in and out. And I also want to provide the repeat, and it's going to repeat itself like infinitely. So now if I save my file and refresh there, here you can see they are bouncing, which is cool, but I only wanted to add one more property which is called the repeat delay. Okay, so like how much time each of the repetition will take. So I'll just write like index time 0.5. Okay, so if I just save my file and refresh there, this one will take like, I don't know, maybe 0.1 second, then it will take like 1.5 second, and it's gonna take like 1 second completely. Okay, so yeah, this is how our loader looks like, and it is looking super cool. I don't know if that's gonna be impressive or not, but for me, that's looking super cool. Let's talk about the variants. So variants are a way to define different state or style for our animation in more organized way. You can think of them as a predefined animation setup that we can switch between easily. So that's just a definition of what a variance is. But now let's talk about how we are going to be defining our variants. So we can just create a set of names like hidden, visible, or basically you can give it any name that you prefer. They describe how the element should look or behave in each state, something which we are going to be seeing in a few seconds. Then we have to use them. So we can apply these variants to our animated component, making it easy to switch between state without repeating our code. So that's just the theory of what a variants are, but now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. There are a few ways to define our variants. The first way is to provide it inline. The second way is to create a separate object and provide the reference of that object to the variant prop. And the final way is to just create a separate file, define your variants there. So I'm going to start from the first one. I'll just provide my variants right here as an inline. We're going to be using the variants, come on, variants, and now inside this variants prop, we are going to be defining our different state. I'm going to give it the name of like hidden right here. Basically, this is going to be just a simple object property, like you know what, let me just show you that. This is going to be the object. We are going to be providing some sort of a property to there, and then a specific value for their property. So which means like you can give it any name that you prefer. You can give it the name of like banana, you can give it the name of like orange, you can give it the name of like my name, Hussein. You can give it any name that you prefer. But now in this case, I'm going to give it the name of hidden. So which means like when my state is hidden, in that situation, I want to set the opacity to 0, and I also want to scale it down to like 0.8 or just a 0 if I wanted to. So this is how we are going to be defining our variant. This is how we are going to be providing a property or a state for our variant, and this is how we are going to be setting the value for the specific variant. Okay, so that's our first variant. I can also create one for the visible. So visible, come on, visible. And now when my object or my state is visible, so in this situation, I want to set my opacity to 1, and I want to scale it up to 1. That's going to be for my visible state. We can also provide one for the exit, and I can like basically go on, and I can specify how many I want. But now in this case, I only want to provide 2. So I'll just provide the opacity, and opacity will be set to 0. I'm going to also provide a scale, and the scale will be set to 0.5. Okay, so now we successfully define our variants, but now the question is, how in the world we are going to be using these state? Like we have a hidden state, we also have the visible, and we also have the exit state. Okay, so now that we successfully define them, now let me show you how we are going to be using them. So now initially, I want my state to be hidden. Okay, so I'm gonna only copy the hidden name from there, and now let me just place it right here. So as soon as I save my file and refresh there, watch what happens. Where in the world is that ball? That ball is totally disappeared. And why is that? Because we specify our hidden property inside our variant, and now we are using there. Let's suppose if I just increase that to 1. Now let me just save my file and refresh there, and it's going to give it back. So this is how we are going to be defining our variant, and this is how we are going to be using this. So you know what, let's just back there to 0. And now I'm going to also provide the animation, so I'll just use like animate property. So on the animate property, I'm going to set there to visible. Okay, not visibility, but this specific visible prop or variant, whatever you want to call that. Oh, I'm getting an error because we are creating already this object, so we don't have to specify double curly braces right here. So I'm going to have to remove one. So now if I just remove that and save my file, and here you can see it will be visible. I can also set that to hidden if I wanted to, so I'll just use like hidden, save my file, bang, that's gone. Okay, so we can also provide the exit. So when it is exit, we want to just use our exit variant, which is this exit variant right here. I'm going to also provide a bit of transition to this, so let's just use like transitions, and for this transition I want to provide the duration of 1 second. So everything is working the way we expect him to work, but I also want to define my own state. So yeah, let me just define there. So I'll use like, is it visible or not? So like is visible, and then set is visible. It's going to be equals to the use state, and here we have to specify true value for there. So now that we successfully defined there, now here we are going to be showing our content based on that visible flag. Okay, so I'm going to copy there, and now let me just place it right here, and here we can use the ternary operator. So if this property is true, you want to set there to visible. So let me just write like visible, but if that's not the case, we want to just set there to hidden like so. Okay, so now let me just save my file. So obviously it's going to give us that circle because we are setting there to true, but if I change that to false, save my file, here you can see that's gone. Let's just save there. I'm going to also provide the on click event handler on there, so when somebody try to click on this bar, so we just want to make it disappear. Okay, so I'll just use like set is visible, and I'm going to provide like not is visible, which means like if it is true, it's going to make it false, but if it's false, it's going to make it true. So if I click on the bar, bang, that's gone. If I click on there once again, here you can see it will make it visible. So yeah, this is how we are going to be defining our own custom variants, and that's just the first way. We can also extract all of that variance from here. Let me just extract that, and we can create a separate object for this. So I'll just give it the name of like I don't know, variance will be fine, and that's going to be set to all of that variance. So as soon as I do this, it's going to give us an error, obviously. So I'm going to copy this variance from there and just provide the reference right here, and if I click on there, everything is working the way we expect him to work. So that's the second way. We can also create a separate file for this. So I'm going to copy the name of that and create my variance dot ts, or ts would be fine, and here I can cut that from here, and I can just place that here and provide my export statement, save my file. So now I can use like import variants from where, let's just go ahead and go to our variants file. Now if I save my file, but we're gonna have to grab them manually like so. Now if I save my file, here you can see we are now getting this circle. You can click on there and it's gonna show it and it's gonna hide it. That was just the basics of variants. Welcome to the example number 1. In this one, I'm going to be showing you how we are going to be creating the flipping card by using the variant. So I'll just create a component with the name of flipping card.tsx, and here I'm going to just define my RAFCE like so. Okay, so let's just define there or register there right here. So we have our flipping card, and execute there, save there, and here you can see we are now getting our flipping card, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import something called the motion. I guess you don't know that from the Framer motion. And now inside there, let's just take care of the UI. I'll just remove that from here, and here I'm gonna also provide my perspective right here, like perspective, and set that to 1000. Inside there, we are going to be defining yet another div. So I'll just define that right here, and I'm gonna give it a few classes, like width will be set to 64, and we also have to provide the height of 40, and background will be set to totally white, rounded totally large, and also shadow will be set to totally large, and overflow will be set to totally large. And I'm gonna also, overflow will not be set to large, it's gonna be hidden like so. And we also have to specify the transform property, like transform, and we have to provide the transform style to preserve 3D like so. And let's just save our file. So this is how it looks like. I'm gonna go ahead and go to this div, and inside this div we have to create yet another div. So now for this div, it's gonna say like front side, not size but front side like so. We also have to provide few classes to this, so I'll just use like absolute, come on, ABSOLUTE, and then we also have to specify the inset. Inset will be set to 0, background will be set to totally white, flex and items will be set to center, and justify will be center, come on, center like so. Text will be set to totally extra large, and font will be also set to totally bold. Okay, so if I save my file, this is how it looks like right here. So that's going to be the front side. Now I'm going to also duplicate there and change that to the back side. So let's just duplicate there and change there to the back side, back side like so, and change the background color to come on, totally blue of 500, and this should also rotate. So I'll just put a bit of rotation right here, like rotate on the y-axis of 180 degree. So here you can see we are now getting this different color. Now it's time to provide the animation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to be defining my state. So I'll use like is flipped, and then set is flipped, come on, FLIPPED. It's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to false. Okay, so that's done. We also have to make this div as a motion div. So I'm going to select that and change that to motion, and here at the bottom we are now getting this error, so we also have to change that to motion.div. Okay, like so. And when somebody try to click on this button, you just only want to fire this function, which is just set the is flip property to, if this is set to true, we have to make that as a false. So if this is false, you have to make that true. Okay, so if I click on there, nothing is happening, obviously, because we have to change a lot of stuff inside there. Now inside this div, we have yet another div, so we also have to convert that to the motion div. So I'm going to just convert that to the motion div, copy the name up there and place that right here. And here for this motion div, we have to specify our variants. So I'll just use like variants, and here inside this variance property, what do we have to do? We have to provide the front side. So I'll use like not front but front side, and that's going to be set to the rotate y, and the y rotation will be set to 0. I'm going to just duplicate this line of code and change that to the back. Okay, and on the back we have to change the rotation to 180 degree. So now let's just save our file and use these variants inside our component. So I'll just use like for the initial state we have to set there to the front, and now for the animate we have to provide there as a ternary operator. So if this is flipped, we want to use the back one, but if that's not the case, we want to use the fourth one or the front one. We also want to provide the transition to it. So for the transition, I'm going to specify the duration of 0.6 seconds. So now let me just save my file. We're getting this UI, which is not something that we want, so I'll just remove these styling from here. So now if I save my file, here you can see we're now getting this card right here. So here you can see we are now getting our backside, but now if I click on there, we are now getting they're totally revert. Okay, so yeah, this is looking amazing. So this is how we are going to be creating our flipping card by using the framer motion. So we don't have to do a lot of stuff, like we are using what do we call it, our Tailwind CSS classes for the styling. Like we're not doing anything with there, but for the animation we are only creating our variants right here, and which is just simply a front and also the back. So whenever we are using the front side, we just only want to rotate the y-axis to 0, and whenever we are using the back side, so you want to rotate there on the 180 degree. So if I click on there, here you can see we are just flipping our card. That's as simple as that. I know this is simple, but yeah, that's cool. These aren't looking that great, so I'm gonna cut that from here, and I'll just define my variants right here at the top. So I'll give it the name of like card variants. It's going to be equals to these variants right here. I'm going to copy the name of these card variants and provide the reference of there right here. So still we're getting our flipping card, which is looking amazing. Let's talk about one of your favorite topic, and I know you're gonna love this one. I can totally guarantee that. What am I talking about? I am talking about the gesture animation. So what are they and why you should even care about them? Gestures allow you to add interactive animation based on the user action, like dragging or hovering or tapping, makes our component responsive to how user interact with them. So that's just the theory of what a gesture animations is, and in this section we're going to be learning about the dragging, hovering, and also the tapping. I want to use framer motion, but there is something wrong with this code, and I want you to pause the video and answer me. What's wrong with this code? And you guessed it, the answer is obviously we're gonna have to import what do we call it, not the create function, but we're gonna have to import the motion function or object from where, from the not Zustand but from the framer motion. I'm currently working on the Zustand course, so that's why I'm like importing every single thing from the Zustand. Anyways, let's talk about the what do we call it, the gesture animation in the framer motion. So the first thing we are going to be learning is something called the while hover, and you guys already guessed it, we are going to be working with the hovering animation. So you know what, first of all we have to define our motion.div, and inside this motion.div, you know what, we're going to have to remove there and close it like so. Okay, so inside there we're going to be providing a class of box, so it's going to give us that circle right here, which is looking amazing. And now we have to provide our animation. So let's talk about the while hover animation. Okay, so I'll use like while hover. In this property or propel allows us to provide our animation whenever somebody hover over our element. Okay, so I'll just provide like, let's suppose if I want to increase the scaling of there, so I'm going to increase the scaling of there to like 1.2, and I'm going to also rotate this. So for the rotation I'm going to set there to 10. I'm going to also go ahead and go to my index.css file and comment this line out. And now if I hover over there, it's going to first of all increase the scaling to 1.5, and it's going to also rotate there to 10 degree. Let me just hover over there once again, and we're not only limited to just provide them, we can do a lot of crazy stuff with them. But you know what, let me just provide a transition. Okay, so for the transition I'm going to use some different things, like the type will be set to spring, and also stiffness will be set to 300. Now I know a lot of you will ask me, But then what the hell is this type and what the hell is this stiffness? You don't have to worry about that. Let me just say that once again. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to go to the physics animation, you can definitely check out like what is a spring animation and what is a stiffness and all of that. But basically, I'm using both of them right now because it's gonna make my animation super smooth. And if you want me to make a separate video about what we call a physics animation, I can totally do that. But I guess I know a lot of people will not be interested in that because they are super difficult to work with. So you know what, let me just hover over there. And here you can see it's gonna give us kind of a bouncy, like a spring effect. And do you guys even know what a spring is? I'm talking about the actual spring, like a spring, S-P-R-I-N-G. You know, let me just type that right here, like S-P-R-I-N-G. I'm talking about that spring. Okay, so if I hover my mouse over to there, it's gonna just bounce it back. If I comment this line out, save my file and hover my mouse over to there, it's not gonna give us that kind of a spring animation. But now, if I just uncomment there and hover my mouse over to there, it's gonna give us kind of a springy animation right here. And that's coming from this type of spring. And also this is something called the physics animation. So yeah, this is how we are going to be working with the while hover whenever somebody hover over there. So we want to just make this styling right here or provide this animation. So that's the while hover. I'm going to remove that from here. And the next one is also totally self-explanatory. So we are going to be using the while tab whenever somebody clicks on there. So this is also super simple and easy to work with. So we're going to be creating our div once again. And here we have to define our box first of all so that we can see something. And whenever somebody tap there, so we're going to be using like while tap. Okay, so whenever somebody tap there, in that situation, we once again want to increase the scaling of this. So I'm going to just convert that to like 0.8, and I'm going to also change the background color to totally, I don't know, maybe crimson would be fine. So now if I save my file, and now if I hover my mouse over to there, you know what, let me just refresh there. If I hover my mouse over to there, nothing will happen. But if I click on there, it's gonna first of all decrease the scaling, and it's gonna also change the background color to crimson. Okay, and we can also provide the transition once again. And for the transition, I'm gonna provide like the type of spring, and I will also provide the stiffness and set there to 300. Okay, and you know what, let me just refresh there once again. And if I click on there, we are now getting that bouncy effect, that spring effect. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, and now finally, once again, finally, let's talk about one of your favorite one, which is called the while drag. I know a lot of people were waiting for this one, so I want to show you that as quickly as possible. So let's talk about it. Now I'm going to also provide the class name of box. And now if you want to make this element draggable, so we don't have to do nothing, we just have to provide drag. That's it. So if we just specify this drag, I can totally drag this element to whatever I want. So here you can see this is totally draggable. And if I just leave there, it will remove it from the UI. If I go ahead and check it out, you know what, that's super gone. So we can just totally drag there, we can leave it wherever we want. But this is not something that we want. We want to provide some sort of a boundaries to there. We can totally provide the boundaries if we wanted to, but now we can also make it as an x-axis draggable. So if I just write like x right here, save my file, and here you can see if I click on there and put there on the top, I'm no longer able to move there or drag there on the y-axis. It's gonna only work on the x-axis right here. I guess you can see the, but here you can see I'm trying to drag that on the top, but it will not let me because here I'm now specifying this x property, which means like we only want to drag that on the x-axis. Okay, so let's just try that once again. Let's remove this, so it's going to hide it from the viewport, and we're going to have to refresh our page to get it back. So that was just a drag, and now let's talk about the constraint. In some situation, but not in some situation, but in a lot of cases, we would want this element to only be draggable in certain area, like maybe we only want that to be draggable in this area, not more than that. Okay, or maybe we want it to just like be draggable on this area, or maybe smaller one. So how can we provide our constraint or our rules for that? So to provide that, we have yet another property which is called, or prop, which is called a drag constraint. Okay, so we can now specify our different constraint to that. So I'll just provide like that on the top it's going to be set to 50, and we can also provide like on the left it's going to be set to 50, on the right it's going to be set to positive 50, and on the bottom it's going to be also set to positive 50. So now if I save my file, here you can see it's going to give us that constraint right here. If I try to drag there, here you can see it will make it drag, but if I leave there, it's gonna put it back. Okay, let me just try that once again. Here you can see it's not gonna be draggable like anywhere, and it's gonna push it right here back. Okay, so this is how we are going to be making our element totally draggable, and this is how we are going to be providing a constraints for that. You can definitely try that by yourself, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so time for the demo one. I'm going to create a folder with the name of components, and then animated card.tsx. Let's just use our RAFCE inside there, and register my component. Right, not animated presence, god damn it. Animated card, and create my component and remove that one. Here you can see we are now getting our animated card, which is looking super awesome. Alrighty, so let's talk about it. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to remove the and provide a bit of classes to this one, like maximum width will be set to small, margin on the x-axis will be set to auto, background totally white, rounded, totally large, and shadow large overflow will be set to hidden, and cursor will be set to pointer. Go back, cursor will be set to pointer like so. Save our file. Inside there we are going to be rendering our image, but first of all we have to let me just provide a bit of alternative text for there, like card image or something like that. I just copy this image from the unsplash.com. You can definitely go ahead and go to my GitHub repository and only grab this image from there. I'm gonna also provide a bit of classes to this, like width will be set to totally full, height will be set to 48, and object totally cover like so. Okay, so here you can see this is how my image looks like, and now underneath this image, what do you want to do? We just want to create our div with the class of padding for the x-axis will be set to 6, and also you want to provide our h2, and text will be set to extra large, font will be set to semi bold, and margin for the bottom will be set to 2. And for the title, I'll just provide like car title, or my, you know what, that's gonna be fine. I'm not gonna waste your time on the UI. Let's just create our paragraph with the classes of text will be set to totally gray of 700, 700, and also margin for the bottom will be set to 4. And here I'm gonna just write like this is a simple card with framer motion animations and tailwind cs tailwind css for styling and react craziness or something like that. I guess that's gonna be fine. This tailwind for the styling would be fine. Okay, so if I save this, here you can see we're now getting this body, and now underneath we're going to be also creating a button, and which will say like learn more. I know the button is not looking great, so we're gonna have to provide a bit of styling to that, like pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, background will be set to TL 400, or you know what, 500 would be fine. Text will be set to totally white and also rounded. When somebody hover over this, we just want to change the background color to like teal, I don't know, maybe this color, and also provide our transitions to the, okay, so let's just provide our transitions. So now let me just save my file. If I hover my mouse over to there, so yeah, this is how we are getting this kind of a crazy card right here. So now it's time to animate there. So to animate there, you guessed it, we're gonna need something called the motion. From where? From the framer motion, like so. Next, I'm gonna convert this div to the motion.div. I'll go to the bottom, and here we have to change the to motion.div, okay, like so. Now I'm gonna go ahead and go to the top once again and provide my animations right here. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to provide my initial state. Let's just zoom in a bit. Okay, so for the initial state, I'm gonna provide the scaling, and scale will be set to 1, and rotate will be set to 0. Okay, just a 0, god damn it. So that's gonna be my initial state. When somebody hover over there, so in that situation, you want to just increase the size of that to like 1.05, and also you want to rotate it down to 3. Okay, and now underneath there, when somebody try to tap there or try to click on there, so in that situation we are going to be scaling it down. So I'll just use like scale of 0.95. Now underneath there, we also want to make it totally draggable. Let me just save this file and check this out. So yeah, that's totally cool. I also want to make it draggable, so I'm gonna write like drag, and it's gonna be draggable totally dynamically. I'm gonna also provide the drag constraints, and for the drag constraints we're going to be providing a left, and left will be set to -50. And I also want to provide the right, and right will be set to +50. And on the top, we're going to be providing -50. And on the bottom, let's just provide 50 right here. Okay. And we also have yet another property which is called the drag elastic. You don't have to worry about that, but basically it's going to make just our draggable more elastic. So if you care about that, you don't even have to worry about that. But yeah, this property is also available if you care about that. So I'm going to only specify like 0.2. And now if I just drag there, it's gonna make it a bit elastic right here. Okay, as you can see, I'm gonna show you that in a few seconds. But now I'm gonna also provide the transitions, and the transition will be set to, the type will be set to spring, because I want my spring animation, and the stiffness will be set to 300 like so. So let me just make that a bit bigger, and this is how my card looks like right here. So if I hover my mouse over to there, it's gonna make it a bit tilt. Now if I click on there, it's gonna change the scaling of there, and yeah, this is how it looks like right here. I can totally drag it if I wanted to, and that's gonna be amazing card for your upcoming portfolio. Yeah, that was cool. Okay, so you know what, let me just give you one more example, which will be the animated image gallery. So I'll just create like image gallery.tsx right here and create my RAFCE, go to my app, comment this line out, and render my image gallery. There we go, save my file, and here you can see we're now getting our image gallery, which is looking cool. Let's go to our image gallery and take care of that. The first thing that we would need is the motion object. So we're going to be importing the motion from where? From the framer motion like so. And also we are going to need some sort of images. So here I'm going to place these images right here. So we have array with the name of images, and inside there we have a few objects. So each object will have the image and also the caption. You can totally definitely modify that if you wanted to. But yeah, we have a few images right here, and if you care about these images, you can totally find them in my GitHub repository. So that's done. Next, I'm going to just remove that from here, and I'm going to provide a bit of width to this, so that width will be set to 80%, and that's going to be set to flex. So inside this div, I'm going to iterate over through all of that images. So I'll use like images. What the hell did I just do? Copy the images, place it right here, and let's just iterate over through there by using the map method. And we're going to need the image and also the index right here. So now inside there, we are going to be defining our div. So what the hell? Let's just define our div totally manually like so. I'm going to also close there, and for this div we are going to be providing the key, and the key will be that index which we are now getting for each of the image. We are going to be also providing a bit of classes today, so I'll use like relative. Margin will be set to 1 rem all around, and overflow will be set to hidden, and rounded totally large. Shadow will also be set to large, and yeah, that's going to be fine. Now inside this div, what do we have to do? We have to render our image. So if I just use the image tag, and here we only have to use like image and then src, which is coming from this image right here, and this image is including all of that image, and we are only interested in this src, like the source of our image. Okay, so it's going to render our image. I'm going to also provide a bit of caption right here, so I'll use like image.captions. I'm going to just render there like so, and here I'll also provide a class name of width will be set to totally full, and the height will be also set to auto. And here you can see this is how they looks like. I know they are not looking that better, but we are going to make it a bit better in a few seconds. So you know what, let's just create here another div. Inside this div we're going to be providing a lot of styling, so I'll just use like absolute, come on, ABSOLUTE. This one is relative, so now this div is absolute to this relative div, which means like this div will be inside this div right here. But no matter what happened, this div will be inside this div. No matter how much height we provide, or no matter how much width we provide, this div will be inside this relative div. Okay, so that's why we are now providing the property of absolute today. Let's just provide our insert will be now set to 0. Flex and items will be set to center, and justify will be set to center, and background will be set to totally black, black like so. Background opacity, OPACITY, opacity will be set to 50, and provide the text totally white. Opacity will be set to 0, and somebody hover over this. We are going to be changing the opacity to 100, and we also have to provide the transition for the opacity, and duration will be set to 300 like so. The cursor will also be set to pointer, and now inside there we only have to render our paragraph, and this paragraph will say like we only want the image dot caption like so. Okay, close there, and provide the classes of text only large. Save our file. Check this out. So if I hover my mouse over to there, it's gonna give us that transition and that a bit animation, but now we have to use our framer motion to add there. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and attach my framer motion right here. Okay, so let's just first of all start from this one. I'm gonna make it as a motion.div, and I'm gonna also make this one motion.div right here. And when somebody hover over there, so I'll just use like while hover, and when somebody hover over there, so we just want to change the scaling. So I'll write like scale will be set to 1.05, Okay, so now let me just hover over there. It's gonna change the scaling right here. Okay, so they are looking better. And when somebody hover over this div, I'm gonna just change the opacity of this. So I'll use like while hover, come on, while hover, HOVER, like so. I'm gonna provide the opacity and set there to 1. And I'm not getting suggestions because we have to convert this one to motion.div and also convert this one to motion.div like so. Okay, so now if I save my file, and here you can see if I hover my mouse over to there, so it's going to make the opacity to 1. I want to make them on a center, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my app, and on this app I'm going to provide the classes. So the minimum height will be set to screen and background will be set to gray of 100. Flex items will be set to totally center. Justify will be set to center. Save my file, check this out. So yeah, they are looking cool. Yep, I can totally remove the background if I wanted to. Yeah, they're looking cool. Now we are going to be combining variants with gesture animation. So to do that, we are going to be creating our animated shape.tsx file, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE. Go to my not index but app component and define my animated shape. Come on, let's just put our animated shape right here and close the save our file. And here you can see we're now getting our animated shape, which is looking cool. And the first thing that you want to do is that you want to import the motion from where? From the framer motion, like so. Now we have to define our variants. I'll use like const box variants is going to be equals to this object right here. So we have to define 3 states. So the first state will be the initial state, initial, and now I'm going to provide a comma and duplicate that 3 times. We're going to be also providing the hover state and also the click. Okay, so these are going to be my state, and now let's talk about the initial state. For the initial state, we're going to be providing a scale of 1 and the rotation of 0. And I'm going to also provide the skew, and skew will be set to 0. Okay, so when somebody try to hover over there, we're going to be changing the scale. Let's just write a scale to 1.2, and we're going to be also providing the rotation to 15 degree, and the skew will be also set to 10 degree. Okay, and provide the transitions. Transition will be set to duration of 0.3 seconds. Okay, so when somebody hover over there, and now let's take care of the final state, which is a click state. So when somebody clicks on there, we're going to be changing the scale to 0.9, and also the rotation will be set to -50 degree. And the transition will take this duration, and duration will be set to 0.3. And where in the world is this error coming from? We have to specify there. Okay, so this is how we are going to be defining our variant box, or box variant, or shape variant, whatever you want to call that. I'm going to comment or hide there. Let's just go ahead and go to our UI and zoom in a bit. And the first thing that we have to do is that we have to provide a bit of classes to there. This is going to be set to flex, and also items will be set to center, and justify will also be set to center, and height will be set to totally screen. Okay, inside this div we have to define our motion.div. Okay, and I'm going to close them. And now we have to provide a bit of styling to this one, like width will be set to 40, and height will also be set to 40, and background will be set to totally blue of 500, rounded totally large. And here you can see we are now getting our box, which is cool. So next we have to provide our variants or our animations. So I'll just use like variants, and now here I'm going to copy the name of this box variant and provide them as a reference right here. Okay, so let's just save our file, and now we are going to be using those variants. So I'll just put the initial state, and for the initial state we are going to be using this initial state right here, which we already defined inside our box variant, which means like scaling will be set to 1, the rotation will be 0, and also the skew will be 0. And next we also have to specify when somebody hover over there. So in that situation we want to use our hover right here. Okay, so we already defined there. The scaling will be set to 1.2, the rotation will be 15 degree, skewing will be set to 10 degree, and transition 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 will be set to duration 0.3. Okay, we also have to specify when somebody tap on there. So we are going to be using this click animation, which we have already specified right here. Like scaling will be set to 0.9, rotation will be -50, transition will be 0.3. So if I hover my mouse over to there, so it's going to change the shape of there. But now if I click on there, it's going to also change the shape of this one. We can also make it totally draggable. We can do a lot of stuff with there, like whenever somebody hover over there, so we can totally change the color, or whenever we drag there, so we can also change the color, and so on and so forth. But now the reason for this example is that we can totally mix the, what do we call it, the variants, gesture animations. Now let's quickly talk about something called the stagger animation. And staggered animation refer to a technique where multiple elements animate in a sequence rather than all at once, and this creates a more dynamic and visually appealing effect as each element appear or move slightly after the previous one, adding a sense of rhythm and flow to the animation. So that's just a quick definition of what a staggered animations are. And now let's get into the coding examples, and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now to work with the staggered animation, I'm going to create a folder with the name of components and define my staggered animation.tsx file inside there. Okay, so let's just save our file and register my stagger animation component right here. Okay, so here you can see we are now getting what's stagger animation, which is looking cool. Okay, I'm gonna also go ahead and go to my index.css and remove this flex from there, and here you can see it's gonna make it at the center. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to remove that stagger animation and grab my motion from where? From the framer motion, like so. Now inside there, what do you want to do? You just want to get like 5 array elements. I'll use like array, and here we have to specify 5 inside there, and I'm going to iterate over through all of this. So I'll just use like map method, and inside this one we don't need the data, we only need the index. Okay, so inside there we're going to be creating our div once again. So let's just create them manually, and I'm going to duplicate there and close there like so. Okay, so for this div, I'm going to provide a class name of box, and margin for the top will be set to rem. Save our file, and this is how it looks like right here. And for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and go to my index.css and remove every single thing from there and provide this new CSS right here. So once again, we have all of their previous code, but now in this situation, we are just providing a bit more styling to this box. So width will be set to 150, height will be set to 150, and border radius will be set to 50%. We are changing the background color and also providing a bit of blur filter to there, and we are also adding a box shadow. The background color will be set to totally yellow, and then we are just centering out every single thing. So that's just the styling that you have to specify for this box. And now let's get into it. Now this is how everything looks like, but I'm going to also provide a key, and the key will be set to index, and here we have to specify our variant. So to do that, first of all, we have to create the parent variant, and then we are going to be creating the child variant. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my parent variant, and parent variants will have the hidden property, and inside this hidden we have to specify the opacity, and opacity will be set to 0. We also have to provide the visible, and visible will be set to the opacity. On the visible, opacity will be set to 1, and the transition, come on, let's just provide our transition. And for this transition, we have a stagger children property, stagger, and then children. And basically this property will allows us to provide a delay between each element. Okay, so if I just write like 0.8, okay, so it's going to add that delay to each element that we are now animating right here. You're going to see that in a few seconds, but this is going to be basically my parent variants. Now we have to define the child variant. So I'll just use like child variants, and it's going to be an object. We have to specify the hidden flag, and here the opacity will be set to 0, and the y-axis will be set to 20. Okay, so let's just duplicate there and change there to visible, and the opacity will be set to 1, and the y-axis will be set to just 0. Okay, so now that we successfully defined the parent variant and also the child variant, and now we have to use the inside our divs. So to use there, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to convert there with the motion.div. Okay, so I'm gonna just convert that to the motion.div, and next we have to provide our variants right here. Okay, not this one, but the variants like so. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the top and copy the name of the parent variant and provide there right here, and let's just use there. So for the initial flag, we're going to be using the hidden from the parent variant. Okay, and whenever we want to animate there, so for the animation we're going to be using this visible. So I'll just provide like visible like so. Save my file. So this is how it looks like, and now I'm gonna also use where is the the child variant inside this div. So which means like we have to convert there to the motion div. So I'll just use, or you know what, I'm going to remove this one and close there as a self-closing tag and make there as a motion.div like so. Save my file. Now here inside there we have to specify our variants, and for the variants it's gonna take the child variant. So now let me just save my file. So these are all of the code. So if I just refresh there, nothing is happening, and I realize the spelling is incorrect. So we have to provide the stagger children. Okay, so now if I just refresh there, here you can see it's going to give us first of all the first one, then the second, and so on and so forth. And it's going to provide their delay right here. So we are now just delaying each element before the other one comes up. So let's just refresh there once again. 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is the basics of our stagger animation. We can achieve them by only using the stagger children property. Okay, so that was the demo 1. Now let me also show you the demo 2. And this one will be a bit complicated because we are going to be creating our animated gallery. So I'll just use like RAFC inside there, save my file, comment this line out. And here I'm going to be using my animated gallery right here, close my file or close my component to be precise. And yeah, everything is looking great. Now the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my motion. So I'll use like motion from where? From the framer motion. That's going to be the first thing. Next we have to define our state. So I'll just create like show images and set show images. It's going to be equals to the use state. And here we have to set that to false. Now let me go ahead and go to the UI and take care of this UI right here. So first of all, we're going to be creating a button which will say like, I don't know, show images or hide images. We're going to be taking care of the button in a few seconds, but yeah, or you know what, let me just take care of that right here. Okay, so I'll just use like, if we have the show images like this state, so in that situation what do you want to do? We just want to provide like a hide image or images rather. But if that's not the case, we're going to be providing this level which is a show images right here. So if I save there and refresh there, so here you can see we are now getting our show images. We cannot click on that because first of all we have to attach the event handler. So I'm going to be using like on click event handler, and when somebody click on that, we're going to be firing this handle click function. Okay, so let's just create a tab right here. I'm going to be using like const handle click event handler, and inside there we're going to be firing like set show images. Come on, set show images and provide the previous state and not previous state right here. Okay, not just a previous state. Now if I save there and click on the show images, it's gonna change there to the hide images right here, which is cool. So that's done. I'm gonna also provide a bit of styling to that. So I'll use like classes and margin for the bottom will be set to 2 rem. I'm gonna also provide padding all around will be set to 4, rounded totally large, background yellow, 300 would be fine. Text will be set to totally black and font will be set to bold. Save our file, and yeah, that's looking cool. You know, I'm gonna make that a bit bigger. That's totally fine. Here you can see we are now getting our button, and we are also getting our coding right here. So now underneath this button, what do you want to do? We just want to create our div, and this div will have the class name of flex. Okay, and we're going to be attaching a lot more stuff in there, but now let's just iterate over through all of our images. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to the top and provide my images right here. Okay, so these are the images that I copied from the unsplash.com. If you want to copy this exactly the same images like mine, you can definitely go ahead and go to my GitHub repository and copy all of the images from there. But if you want to choose your own, you are more than welcome to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back, and now we have to iterate over through all of the images. So I'll use like gallery images, and now I'm going to use like map method. Here we have to specify the image and also the index of the image. And inside there, what do you have to do? We have to render our image, and this image will take the src. You know, let's just write them manually. Oh, we can't. We have to write there like so. It's gonna take the source, and it's gonna also take the alternative text, and I'm gonna close there like so. So for the source, what do you have to do? You have to just provide our image, and for the alternative text, I'm gonna write like, I don't know, gallery image, and let's just provide our index +1 to there. That's looking cool. I'm gonna also provide a bit of styling to this. I'll just use like class name. What the hell is that? I'll use like class name, and class name will be set to margin for the left of 2 rem, and width will be set to 300 pixel like so, and totally rounded. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting these images. They are looking cool. If I click on there, nothing will happen. Now finally, it's time to add our animation to there. So I'll just go ahead and create my variants right here like so. So I'll just first of all define my parent variant and then my children variant. Parent variants is going to be an object. We have to specify the hidden property, and the opacity will be set to 0. And now underneath that, we also have to specify the visible. When it's visible, so we have to provide the opacity of 1 to there, and also we have to provide the transition. And for this transition, we are going to be using a stagger animation. So we have to use our stagger children. Come on, STAGGR stagger children, and stagger children, which means like it's going to take 0.5 second for each element. And now I'm going to also introduce another one, which is a stagger, STAGGR stagger direction. And stagger direction will be set to 1, which simply means like forward the stagger when it's showing. Okay, so I'll just save my file. That's the parent variant. Now we have to define the child variant. So I'll just go ahead and define my child variant, and now inside there we have to specify the hidden flag. Opacity will be set to 0 and the y-axis will be set to 20. Okay, so I'll just duplicate that, change that to visible, and the opacity will be set to 1 and the y-axis will be set to 0. And first of all, I'm going to just change that to the motion div. So I'll provide like motion.div and also provide my motion motion.div like so. And here we have to use our variants. So I'll just write like variants, and for the variants we are going to be using our parent variants, and let's just use that. Like for the initial prop we are going to be using our hidden, and when it is animating, so here we have to use our ternary operator. So I'm going to be using like if we have the show images, in that situation we want to make that as a visible, visible, but if that's not the case we just want to set that to hidden like so. Okay, that's totally done. Let me show you that. If I click on there here, that's gonna happen, but that's gonna happen very quickly. Let me click on there once again, and bang, it's gonna take that time, but it's gonna show it totally instantly. So to prevent that from happening, I'm gonna also convert this image to the motion.div, and here we also have to specify our variants right here. I'm going to be using like variants, and for this variant we are going to be providing our child variants. And now if I refresh that and click on the show images, it's going to show all of them one by one. Now if I want to hide them, click on there once again, and bang, that's an amazing animation. Let me just click on there. Yep, this is how we are going to be getting our animated gallery. This is how we are going to be making it disappear. So we don't have to write a lot of code, but we only have to first of all define our state or variants, whatever you want to call them, and then we have to use them inside our div. Okay, as simple as that. Welcome to the second part of this course. So this is going to be basically the intermediate part of the Framer Motion, and in this section we are going to be covering the hooks inside the Framer Motion library. So let's talk about the first hook, which is called the use motion value hook. So the use motion value hook enable fine control over the animation, allowing us to trigger animation programmatically based on the component state or events. It allows for the integration of more complex animation logic that goes beyond what's achievable with just prop on the motion component, like we just saw the animate prop, the variant prop, and so on and so forth. So now the use motion value hook will allows us to create something called the motion value. I'm going to show you what a motion value is in a few seconds, but yeah, let's just go ahead and go to the coding. So before we talk about the use motion value hook, first of all we have to talk about something called the motion value in general. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import the motion from the Framer Motion, and also I want to make this div as a motion div. Okay, so I'll just write like motion.div, and now let's talk about something called the motion values. So I'll just use the animate prop, and I want you to pay attention, please pay attention. Okay, so if I use like X and if I write like 200 pixel, and as soon as I save this file, why in the world am I getting that smooth animation? So if I save there, bang, I'm getting that smooth animation. Like, why is that? I'm not providing a transition, I'm not providing any animation, I'm just only providing like translate on the x-axis 200. Why am I getting that smooth animation? If I change that to like Y, in case if you haven't seen there, so I want you to focus right now. Okay, so if I save there, why am I getting that smooth animation? Well, I'm getting there because of the motion value, and whenever I'm using this animate prop, Framer Motion will give us that motion value totally for free. And now let's talk about how we are going to be creating our own custom motion values. So to do that, we're going to need to import something called the use motion value. Okay, so I'm going to import that, go back, and we have to just create an instance of there. And you can specify any kind of initial value to there, but in my case I'm going to only specify 100 right here. Now we have to store it in some sort of variable, so I'll just use like X, and yeah, that's fine. And I want you to once again pay attention. If I use the animate prop for there, and if I just set the X value to this X, and this X is coming from this use motion value, we are already getting an error, but now I want to save there, and let's just watch what happens. If I just refresh there, here you can see nothing is happening. If I hover my mouse over to there, it's gonna tell me like, yo, you cannot do that, this is just a motion value that you're creating, and that is not assignable to the boolean value. You cannot do that, that's a big no-no. But now the question is, if we are creating our own custom motion value, so how in the world we are going to be using that inside our animation? And to do that, we're going to be using our inline CSS. And that is that we have to use this style, and we can just use the X property, and that X property will be set to this X. But we don't have to specify that X and X. We can just write a X right here. Okay, and now if I save my file and watch what happens, this time we are not going to be getting that smooth animation. We're going to be seeing this div move very instantly. So if I save there, here you can see it's not going to give us that animation anymore. So let me just refresh there, and bang, it is no longer giving us that animation. So if I just change that to like 200 maybe, and let's just refresh there, bang, we are not getting that smooth animation. And why is that? Because we are no longer using the frame on motion value. We are creating our own motion value, and then we are using that motion value right here. Okay, so we can totally change that programmatically if you wanted to. But yeah, there are also a few hooks that I want to talk about. Not hooks, but the event handlers, to be precise. They are something that you don't have to worry about, because they are just an event which will help you debug your animation. So I'm going to use like use motion event, and here we have to specify our motion value, and then we have to specify like which kind of event that you want to fire. So if I hold control and space, so we have like animation cancel, animation complete, animation start, change, and so on. So I'm going to only choose this animation start, and here we have to specify the motion value, keep in mind. Now I'm going to provide a comma, and then we have to specify our arrow function. This is provide our arrow function right here, and I want to check this. So I'll just use like animation started on X. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing that we have to do. I'm going to basically duplicate that and change that to the animation changed like so, and we are going to be also providing this latest value, and here we have to just use that latest value right here. Okay, save our file. You don't even have to worry about these stuff, like, yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Now I'm going to make my component draggable, so I'll just provide my drag right here, and also the drag constraints. For the drag constraints, we're going to be providing the left value, and left will be set to 0, and also the right value will be set to 200. So now if I save my file, you know what, I forgot to do something. We also have to change that to X change to. So now let me just save my file, and now if I just refresh there, nothing will happen. But if I drag my component, so here you can see it's going to give us like X change to this new value, which means like we now successfully created our own custom value, and we are now successfully using them, and this is how we are going to be debugging them. Now I know a lot of you will ask me, Hussein, like this is not a real world example, like we want to get some sort of a real world example, and I'm going to give you that in a few seconds. But yeah, I want you to keep in mind that this is how we are going to be defining our own custom motion value, and this is how we are going to be using that custom motion value. And for the example, one of the motion value hooks, I'll just create a components folder and define my range slider.tsx file inside there. I'm going to use my RAFCE, save my file, and register this component right here. Okay, so use the range slider, hit enter, so it's going to import there, and now we are getting our range slider. Next, I'm going to go ahead and go to the div and create my motion div. But first of all, we're going to have to import the motion from the framer motion. So now inside this div, what do we have to do? We have to create our motion.button, and now we have to close there like so. I'm going to also provide the class name of box today, and now we are getting that box, which is looking cool. Now underneath there, we're going to also create a div with the class of margin for the top, and that's going to take an arbitrary value like 6 rem and close there. Inside this div, I'm going to create an input with a type of range, because we want to just create our range slider, and the minimum height will be set to 0.5, and we also want to provide the maximum it will take like 5, and let's just provide our step. In step it will take like 0.01. I'm going to also provide the default value, not check but default value to them, and the default value it will take a 1. This is save our file. I'm going to also provide the on change event handler. When somebody try to change there, we are going to be firing this function, which is a handle or change handler would be fine, like so. I'm going to copy the name of there and define my function right here. Okay, so let's just use our cons range slider or whatever that is. Save my file, and yeah, that's looking cool. Now to provide our animation, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to create our own motion value. So to do that, we're going to be using our motion value and provide like 1 to them for the initial value. I'm going to store it in the variable with the name of like scale, and it's going to be equals to this use motion value. Okay, so now when somebody try to change them, we're going to be firing this function, but it's going to take the event object, and let's just annotate that with the change event. This is just a TypeScript stuff. You don't even have to worry about that. Write what HTML input element right here, because we want to use the inside our HTML input element. So now we have to use the scale, and then inside the scale we have the get method. We also have the set method, which will allows us to set a new value, and we also have a get method which allows us to get or return the latest new value of the motion value. Okay, so I'll just use like event.target, come on, target.value, and save my file. Okay, so it's gonna give us an error because we have to convert that to a number. So if you want to convert that to a number, so we are going to be providing a plus to there. It's going to convert that to a number, but now in this case we're going to be providing our parse float, because I know the value will be a floating point value, so that's why we have to specify this parse float to there. Oh, here we are using the get method. We have to change that to set because we are changing the, so we have to change that to set. But yeah, you get the idea. Like now that we successfully get the data, but now we have to bind there right here. Okay, so I'll use like style, and let's just write our style. Here we have to use the scaling, which is our own custom motion value hook. So let me just refresh there, and now if I change the slider, here you can see it's going to increase the size of there and also decrease the size of there, but this is not smooth. Like you can also almost feel that. I guess you cannot see that in the video, but if you write this code by yourself, you will totally feel that like this is not smooth, because whenever we convert that to a use spring, which is also something which you are going to be learning in the next section, then you will feel how much smoother that animation can get. But now in this case, like look at this. Yeah, we are getting our slider, like everything is cool, but this is not smooth animation. And why is it not smooth? Because we are not using the framer motion value. We are creating our own custom motion value, and then we are changing that motion value by ourselves. That's why it is not looking that great. But yeah, this is just a first use case of using the use motion hook inside our component. Let's just quickly talk about the use spring hook. So the use spring hook allows us to create smooth spring-based animation. It provides a way to manage animated values that follow a spring physics model, resulting in more natural and fluid motion compared to the linear animation which we just saw a few seconds ago. So we are not going to be doing anything crazy, but we only have to refactor this amount of code. Instead of using this use motion value, let me just show you there. If I change there, here you can see it's not going to work that much smooth. But if I change that to the use spring, let me just use like use spring, and I'm gonna copy the name of that and place that right here. That's the only change that we have to make. And now if I save my file and watch what happens. So now if I just scroll there, here you can see we're now getting this smooth spring based animation right here, like kind of like a bounciness, and that is coming from the use spring. Okay, as you can see, you can also play around with it and then you will feel the animation, but now I'm using that, that's why you cannot feel that. Let me try out this once again. Here you can see this is not that much cool, but now if you use the use spring motion, or use spring hook to be precise, here you can see we're now getting this smooth animation right here. So yeah, that's also another hook. Okay, so let me give you a quick test of what a use transform hook can do. Okay, so right now I'm going to give you just a quick test of what a use transform hook can do and how it works, and later in this course we are going to be covering that in a lot more great detail once we learn about the use scroll hook and so on and so forth. So let's talk about it. So what is a use transform hook? So the use transform hook is used to map one range of values to another. It's great for smooth animation and effects based on the input values like scroll position or mouse movements. So that's just a quick definition of what a use transform hook is, and let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now we are going to be working with the draggable box. So I'm going to create a folder with the name of component, and inside there we are going to be creating our draggable box.tsx. I'll use my RAFCE, and now I'm gonna save my file, go into my app and register the draggable box component, not draggable event, but draggable box component right here. So as soon as I do that, here you can see we're now getting there, which means like everything is working totally fine. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import something called the use transform hook from the framer motion. It's gonna be the first thing. Now I'm gonna call that hook. So I'm gonna use like use transform, and here we have to pass a few things. First of all, we have to specify the value, and that value should be a motion value. You can use the framer motion value, or you can define your own one and provide there. Next, we have to specify the input range. Okay, and then we have to specify the output range, and that's going to be it. Okay, so you know what? Let me just first of all create the motion value. Then we are going to be passing that to this use transform. So I'm going to comment this line out. And we would also need the, what do we call it, the use motion value hook from the framer motion, because now we are creating our own custom motion value. So I'll use like const x, and x will be equals to the use motion value. And here we can specify any kind of motion value. So I'm going to just specify like 1, or you know what, 0 would be fine. Okay, so I'll just specify that 0. I'm going to also duplicate that and change the variable name to y. Okay, so now I'm going to save my file. So this is how we are going to be defining our custom motion value. Now I'm going to uncomment that, and here we have to specify our motion value. I'll only provide the x, and now I'm going to provide the comma, and next here you can see we have to specify the input values, and next we have to specify the input range start and also the input range, range end. Okay, so this is how we are going to be providing this. So our input range will start from -1, and then we want to go into the +1. So that's going to be the starting point of our range. Next, we have to specify the output range start and also the output range end. So what are going to be the values we want to specify for the output range start and for the output range end? I'm going to only specify color right here, like the red color and also the green color. So I'll just write like FF, then 4 zeros. Okay, so this is going to be basically my red color, and we want to go from red color to the green color. So I'm going to write like 00 FF00. And now I'm going to store that in some sort of a variable. So I'll give it the name of like background color, and it's going to be equals to this use transform value. Let me just say that once again. First of all, we have to define our own motion value. Then inside this use transform, the first value it will take is the motion value, which we are providing right here. Next, it will take the input range start and the input range end. Then we have to specify the output range start and the output range end. Okay, so that's the only thing that we have to do. And now let's get into the UI so that we can use that. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to also zoom in a bit so you guys can see everything a bit better. And I'm going to change this div to the motion div. So I'll use like motion.div, not the motion value, but motion, MOTION, there we go. Oh my god. I guess we didn't import that. Yep, we did not. So I'll use like motion. And I'm going to copy them, select this div and hit Ctrl D, provide the motion.div. That's cool. Inside this motion div, I'm going to specify my span with the class of text totally white, white like so. And it will say like drag me. And here you can see we're now getting this drag me. I'm going to also specify a bit of classes to this one. So I'll say like width will be set to 32 and height will be set to 32. Flex and items will be set to center. Justify will be set to center, totally rounded, large, and also shadow will be set to totally large. Cursor will be set to pointer, and I'm gonna also provide the background of totally yellow, and this is going to be the background color. So yeah, this is how it looks like, but I'm going to remove this background color from here, and now I'm going to specify my animation. So I want this div to be draggable, so I'm going to just provide like drag, and also I'm going to specify the draggable constraints. So I'll use like drag constraints, and for these draggable constraints we're going to be providing the left value, or you know what, let me just hit enter right here. We're going to be providing the left value, and the left will be set to -200. I'm going to also specify the right value, and the right will be set to +200. I'm going to specify top to -200, and finally we also have to specify for the bottom of 200. So now if I save my file, oh, we cannot see there because we have to provide this background color to there. We cannot provide the as an animate value because you guys already know that. Here you can see we are now using our custom motion value, so that's why we cannot use our animate prop. So we can just use the style, and here inside this style we can provide our background color, and here you can see it's going to give us that background color right here. But now if I drag, then nothing is happening. And why? Because we did not specify this x and also this y value. So let me just provide that right here. Okay, so I'm going to use like x comma y. You can also specify x to the x value and y to the y value, but this is not what we are going to be doing because we want to use our modern JavaScript. And here we also have to specify the comma. Now I'm going to save my file, and now if I drag there, here you can see it's going to change its color, and that's because of this use transform hook. Let me just show you there once again. Here you can see these are just the constraints. If I drag there to the left, it's going to give us like red color. If I drag there to the right, it's going to give us a green color, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. So yeah, that's just the basics of the use transform hook, and we're going to be covering the use transform hook in a lot of great details. I want you to prepare yourself for a lot of theory because in this section we are going to be covering the scroll animation. So let's talk about how many types of scroll animation that we have. So we only have two types of scroll animation. So we have a scroll trigger animation and we also have the scroll driven animation. So let's start from the first one, which is a scroll trigger animation. So these animation are triggered when the user scroll to a specific point in the viewport. And once the scroll reaches to that specific point, the animation plays. So what are the use cases for them? They are great for revealing the elements, changing the style, or starting animation at a specific section of the page. Now let's talk about the scroll driven animations. So these animation continuously change as the user scroll, allowing for a smoother, more interactive experience. The animation property can be mapped directly to the scroll position. So what are the use cases for the scroll driven animation? And the use cases are like they are ideal for the parallax effect, transforming the element, or adjusting opacity based on the scroll depth. Let's talk about how we are going to be achieving the scroll trigger animation. So to achieve that, there are two props for that. So we are going to be covering the while in view prop and we're going to be also covering the viewport prop. Let's start from the first one, which is a while in view prop. So the while in view prop is used to trigger animation when the element comes into the viewport. It allows us to define how the element should animate while it is visible on the screen. It enables us to create engaging animation that activates when the user scrolls to a specific part of the web page. Okay, so that's just a while in view prop, and now let's talk about the viewport prop. So this prop is used to customize how the animation are triggered based on the visibility of the element inside the viewport. It allows us to specify the setting that affect when and how animation should occur as the element scroll into or out of the view. Okay, so yeah, keep that in mind, and now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's talk about the scroll trigger animation, and we're going to be achieving that by using the while in view prop. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go ahead and create my components folder, and inside there we're going to be defining our animated card.tsx file, and I'm going to be using my RAFC inside there, and let's just put that right here. But first of all, I'm going to write my h1 with the class of text will be set to totally center, and text will be also set to 3xl. Margin for the bottom will be set to 4, and it's going to say like I don't know, scroll down to see the animation, the animation, like so. And here you can see we're now getting this text, which is looking cool. Now underneath this h1, what do you want to do? We just want to create a div with the class of height will be set to totally screen. Now if I save there, here you can see it's going to give us that scroll bar right here, and here is our text, as you can see right there. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my animated card component right here. So we have this animated card. I'm going to close there. Let's just go ahead and go to our component. Let's start working on our animated component. So I'm going to remove there and change the styling of there. First of all, I'm going to be providing the flex. Justify will be set to center, and items will be not center but start in this case. I'm going to also provide margin for the top will be set to 30 rem. Like so. I'm going to save my file, and as you can see, we are now getting the scroll bar. And now inside this div, what do you want to do? We just want to define our div, and this div will have a few classes. So I'll just provide like the class name, the height will be set to 200 ph, and I'm going to also provide the width of totally full. Flex and justify will be set to center, and I'm going to also provide the items to be center. Okay, so if I save there, now inside this div, we're going to be defining our motion div. So I'll use like motion div, but first of all we have to import this. So I'm going to be using like import the motion from where, from the framer motion. Okay, so this is how we are going to be importing there. And now let's just create our motion.div, and I'm going to close this. So now inside this motion div, I'm going to also provide a bit of classes to this. So I'll just write like background will be set to totally white, totally rounded large, and also pairing for all around will be set to 6, and shadow will be also set to large. Text will be set to totally center. Save our file. Inside this div, we are going to be creating our h2, which will have the classes of text 2xl, and also the font will be set to totally bold. Margin for the bottom will be set to 2, text totally black. Okay, like so. And I'm gonna say like amazing card. This is our file, and here you can see we are now getting our amazing card. We did not specify any scrolling effect today, and we did not do anything right now. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to also just complete this card. So I'll just provide a paragraph. Let's just go back, and this paragraph will have the classes of text totally gray of 600, and it's going to say like this is, or you know what, this card animates beautifully into the view or something like that. And here you can see we are now getting this text and also this card, which is looking amazing. So let's just provide our animation right here. So how in the world we are going to be providing our animation, and how our animation will look like. First of all, we are going to be providing our initial state. So for the initial state, I'm going to provide the scaling and decrease the scaling to 0.5. I'm going to also provide the opacity, and opacity will be set to 0. And I'm going to also provide the transition, and the transition will take duration of 0.5 seconds. Okay, so that's cool. And now here we are going to be defining our while in view. Okay, so as long as this card is inside the view, that animation will happen. But if this card is not in the view, that animation will not happen. Okay, so I'm going to use like while in view prop. Here inside there we can specify any kind of animation. So I can use like scale, and scale will be set to 1.1. I'm going to also provide the opacity, and opacity will be set to 1, and the y-axis will just say like -200. So now if I save my file and watch what happens. So if I just refresh there, and if I try to scroll there, did you see there? So we are now scaling it up, and we are also providing opacity to there. So you know what, let me just show you there. And yep, this is looking cool. This is looking cool. But now if I comment this line out, I'm going to just comment this line out, and here you can see that's gone. And now if I scroll down, here you can see it's not even showing because we are providing a scaling of, what do you call it, the scaling of 0.5, and also the opacity will be set to 0. So if I change that to from 0 to 1, and I'm going to also change that to like 1, and here you can see this is how my card looks like right here. So if I scroll down, still we are not getting any animations. But now if I go back and uncomment this code, and now if I save my file, here you can see this animation will happen. So let me just go to the top and refresh there. And if I scroll down, so yeah, that animation is happening, and we can change the color. We can do a lot of stuff with there. So if I just write like I don't know, background color, come on, background color, and I'm gonna just change that to like maybe red color or something like that. And if I just refresh there, come on, what the hell? If I just refresh there, and if I scroll down, here you can see it's gonna give us that background color of totally red. So yeah, that was the while in view prop. Now let's talk about the use scroll hook. So the use scroll hook help track the scroll position of the page. It makes it easy to create animation or effect that respond to how much the user have scrolled. So yeah, that's just a definition of what a use scroll is. And now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now let me give you a quick test of the use scroll animation. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my folder with the name of components, and inside there we are going to be creating the scroll animation.tsx file, and I'm going to be using the RAFC inside there. Now let's just go ahead and go to our app and register that scroll component right here, and I'm going to close there. So if I save this file right now, and now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to use our use scroll animation, and now we have to import that not from the framer but from the framer motion. So I'll use like the framer motion, and now we have to store that in some sort of a variable. So I'll use like scroll length is going to be equals to this use scroll. I'm going to log that to the console like scroll, and now if I save my file, I'm going to open my console, and here inside this console now we are getting these two objects. So if I expand there, and these properties are a motion values, and remember we already cover a motion values. So we have like scroll on the x-axis and scroll x progress y-axis, and also scroll y-axis progress. So yeah, we can use these properties to make amazing animation. I'm going to remove that from here. And next, I'm going to destructure only the scroll on the y-axis, not the x-axis, but on the y-axis. And the next thing that I want to do is that I want to use events. So I'm going to use like the use motion value event. Come on, use motion value event, like so. And it's going to take the motion value first of all. So I'm going to copy a name of there, because we already know that this property is a motion value. And the next thing that we have to do is that we have to specify which kind of event you want to fire. So here you can see we have a change, we have the animation start, the animation complete, cancel, and so much more. I'm going to only choose the change. And now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to call our callback function and get the latest value out of there. Okay, so I'm going to go inside there, and now let me just log to the console this page scroll, and here we are going to be rendering our latest value inside there. I'm going to save my file right now, but now we need a place to scroll through. So I'm going to remove that from here, and inside there I'm going to use my UL and LI. I want them to be like 50 maybe, and as soon as I hit enter, so it's going to give us like 50 LI. And now if I save my file, let me just test this out. So I'll use like h1 of allow something, and yeah, we are getting there, but why aren't we getting that? You know what, I'm going to also provide the class name of height will be set to totally screen. So now if I do that, and now we are getting our scroll bar right here. So I'm going to open my console once again and go to my console. Now we are getting this data, but now as soon as I scroll, here you can see we are now getting this different data. First of all, we are getting this data, then we are getting the 2, and so on and so forth. So as soon as I scroll there, it's gonna give us that new value. So based on these new values, we can create a smooth animation or a scroll smooth animation. And yeah, that's just the basics of the use scroll hook. Now let me show you how we are going to be using the use scroll hook with the use transform hook. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a folder with the name of components, and inside there we are going to be defining the scroll animation, animation animation.tsx. And now let me use my RAFCE inside there, save this file and call this component right here. So we have a scroll animation component. Now let me just save there, and now let me go into my component, and now let's start working on there. So the first thing that I would need is the use scroll, and now we are going to be getting there from the framer motion like so. And next we have to store them in some sort of a variable, or we have to destructure the scroll y-axis from the use scroll. So that's done. Next we have to define our use transform hook. So we are going to be defining there for the scale and also for the opacity. So I'll use like scale, and scale will be equals to the use transform hook. And for this use transform hook, it's going to take the motion value, and we already know that this scroll y-axis is a motion value, so I'm going to pass that right here. Next we have to provide the starting point. So when our animation start from 0, so in that situation we wanted to change that to 1. And when our animation reaches to 300, so in that situation we want to set that to 1.5, like the scaling to 1.5. That's done. Now let me also use the transform hook for the opacity. So I'll use like opacity, opacity, and it's going to be equals to use transform hook. And here once again we are going to be passing our scroll on the y-axis as a motion value today. And then when it starts from 0, what do you want to do in that situation? We want to set that to 1. And when it reaches to 300, so in that situation we want to set that to 0. Now I'm going to save my file, and now let me go ahead and go to my UI and use that. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to be attaching like height of totally screen, and flex and items, come on, items will be set to totally center, and justify will be also set to totally center. Inside this div we are going to be defining our motion.div. Okay, so first of all we have to get the motion, and then we would be able to use that motion right here. So I'm going to be using motion.value, and inside there I'm going to be providing a bit of classes to it, like background totally blue of 500, and width will be set to 32. Come on, let's just set that to 32, and height will also be set to 32, totally rounded large, and shadow will be set to totally large. And now for the styling, we know that we are going to be using the motion values, which also means that we are going to be passing the scaling and also the opacity to this style. So I'm going to pass the scale and also the opacity. Let me just copy the name of there and place it right here, save my file. And now underneath there we are going to be creating a div for the scrolling. So I'll just use a div, and the width will be set to totally full, and for the height we are going to be using 150 viewport height. Now let me just close there, and it should be height, not width. And here you can see we are now getting this box, and when I scroll down here you can see it will make it disappear. So you know what, let me just go ahead and provide a bit of styling to my body. I'll just place this styling. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see we're now getting this div, and now as soon as I scroll there, here you can see it's gonna make it disappear. And I can also make the height to like, I don't know, maybe 200. So now let me just change that to 200, and here you can see it's gonna make it disappear. So I want you to notice here you can see it's gonna increase the scaling of there, and also it's gonna change the opacity, and we can totally achieve them by using just the use scroll hook and also the use transform hook. So yeah, I know that's just a simple and basic animation, but that's just the example of the use scroll and the use transform hook. Now let me give you another example. So I'm going to remove this coding from here, and I'm going to create another component with the name of animation or animation scroll.tsx will be fine. Now I'll use the RAFCE inside there. Go ahead and go to my app and use the animation scroll right here and close there. Now let's just go ahead and go to our animation scroll and start working on there. The first thing that we would need is the use scroll animation. I mean like the use scroll hook to be precise. And now we have to destructure the scroll on the y-axis from the use scroll hook. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to transform the scale and the border radius based on the scroll position. So how in the world we are going to be doing that? We are going to be calling the use transform hook from the framer motion, and we would need that from the framer motion rather than just a motion. And here it's going to take the motion value, so I'm going to copy a name of that and place it right here. And starting from 0, we want to set that to 1, and then going through 1000 we wanted to decrease the size of this. So I'll use like 0.5, and now we can store them inside the variable. So I'll use like scale, and it's going to be equals to this use transform hook. Next we have to create our border radius. So it's going to start from square, and then it will make it as a circle. So I'll use like border radius, and it's going to be equals to this use transform hook. And for this use transform hook, we are going to be specifying the scroll on the y-axis starting from 0, and then we want to set there to 0%, and then when it goes to 1000, we want to set there to 50%. That's also done. Now we have to use that inside our UI. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove this animation scroll from here, and now I'm going to provide a bit of classes to this. So I'll use like the class name will be set to relative, height will be set to totally screen, and the overflow will be set to totally hidden. Inside this div, we are going to be defining our motion.image. Okay, so first of all, we want to have to import the motion. So I'll use like the motion from the framer motion, and inside this div, we are going to be defining our motion.image or img like that. I'm going to close there, and here it's going to take the source, and also it's going to take the alternative text. So for this alternative text, I'm going to specify background, and for this source we are going to be providing this image. So now let me just save my file. I'm going to also provide a bit of classes to this. So I'll use like it's going to be set to totally absolute, and inset will be set to totally 0, width will be set to totally full, height totally full, and object totally cover. I'm going to save this file right now. Now we also have to attach our styling. So for this styling, we're going to be providing our scale. So I'm going to copy a name of that and provide the scale right here. I'm going to also specify this border radius. So I'm going to copy a name of that and place it right here. And now underneath there, what do we have to do? We have to create a div with the class of sticky, and top will be set to totally 0. The height will be set to totally screen. Items will be set to totally center. And also justify will be set to totally center. Inside there, we are going to be creating h1 with the class of text totally white and text totally 4XL. And inside there, I'll use like scroll to animate. So now let me just save my file, and here you can see we are now getting this image. But now as soon as I scroll there, okay, we can't even scroll there. So you know what, let's just go ahead and go to our app, and now underneath there we have to just provide some sort of a div with the class of a lot of classes. So I'll use a div, and here we are going to be providing the height of 200% so that we can see them, and also background probably gray of 800, and flex items will be set to totally center. Justify will also be set to totally center. Inside there, we're going to be creating h2 with the class of text totally white, and here we have to specify the scroll down. I'm going to save this file right now. And now as soon as I scroll, here you can see we're now getting that border radius and also that smooth animation on the scroll. So if I scroll it back, here you can see we're now getting this full image, and that's, oh, what the hell is this guy even doing? So yeah, that's our use scroll hook. Welcome to the first exercise of this course. So in this one, we're going to be building 6 amazing animation, but they are not going to be advanced. Like, they are going to be totally simple because this is the first exercise of this course. Okay, so let's start from the first one. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to create a box that moves across the screen. You should have to create a simple box by using the div, or you can also create a section or anything that you prefer. Then use the framer motion to animate that box from the left side of the screen to the right. Do that, then we're going to be doing the rest of them. So let's just start working on that. So I'm going to be creating my components folder, and inside there, let's just define our box.tsx file, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE, save my file, and register there right here. So we have to write a box and hit enter, so it's going to render there right here. Check this out. So we are now getting that box, which is looking cool. Okay, so the next thing that we have to do is that we have to provide our animation. So I'll just import my motion from where? From the framer motion. So that's done. We also have to specify our motion dot, or you know what, I'm going to remove that from here. I'm going to also remove that box, and I'm going to close that like a self-closing tag. And I'm going to provide my motion div. I'll also provide a bit of classes, like the background will be set to totally blue of 200, and the width will be set to 20, and also the height will be set to 20. Okay, and now let me provide my animation. So I'll just provide my initial state, and for this initial state, we're going to be providing the x value, and x is going to be set to 100 minus 100, and when we want to animate that, so we're going to be setting the x value to positive 100. And finally, we're going to be providing a bit of transition, and also I'm going to provide a duration of 2 seconds. So now I'm going to save my file. Now if I just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting our box. We can also use our, what do we call it, our box simply. So I'll just write like that, box, save my file, and yo, they're super big. Okay, so if I just refresh there, we are now getting this amazing animation. So that's the first thing that we have to do. Next, we have to create a vertical movement. So make a circle bounce up and down. So create a circle by using a CSS, or you can also use a Tailwind CSS. Then animate that circle to move vertically, bouncing at the top and bottom of the container. So this is what you have to do. Next, so give it your best shot. If you can't do it, then that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. So I'm gonna go ahead and create my component right here. I'm gonna give it the name of like bouncing, or bouncing circle rather, .tsx. Spelling is incorrect. BOUNCING, bouncing circle .tsx, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there. And now let's just register this component right here. So I'm going to be using my bouncing circle and close them. And now inside this component, what do we have to do? The first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion. So I'm going to be using like import motion from where? From the framer motion. And now we have to define our circle. So I'll just remove that and close that like so. And I'm going to make that as a motion.div. And you can also make that as a motion.section or article or whatever you want to call that. I'm going to just make it like div. And I'm going to also make a circle by using the Tailwind CSS. And I'll use like background totally red of 500 and round it totally full. Width will be set to 20. Height will also be set to 20. And now let's just provide our animation. So I'm going to be using the animate prop. And on this animation, we want to set the y-axis to 0, minus 100, 0. Now underneath there, we also have to specify the transition. And for this transition, we are going to be providing a duration of 1. And the repeat will be set to 1. And not 1, but and repeat will be set to infinity. And also the easing will be set to ease in and out like so. So I'm going to save my file. And that's all the code that we have to write. And here you can see we are now getting our bouncing ball right here, which is looking cool. Okay, so that's also amazing. And that's the second exercise. Next, we have to create our rotation animation. So what do we have to do? We have to spin an icon continuously. So you can either use the SVG tag, or you can use some sort of a React icons if you prefer that. Then animate that icon to rotate indefinitely. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, you know what to do. Okay, so let's just create a component with the name of spinning icon.tsx. And I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside this, save my file, go to my app.tsx like so, comment this line out, and I'm going to be using my spinning 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 icon, and we are now getting that. I'm going to go ahead and remove that and change that to the image tag. And I'm going to also close that, and inside this image we are going to be providing this source. Okay, so now let me just provide that right here, and now let me import the motion. Motion from where? From the framer motion. I'm going to save my file, and this is basically the logo of the framer motion. Okay, so we're going to be providing the class name of width will be set to 20, height will also be set to 20, and let's just provide our animate prop. So let's just use our animate. Inside there we are going to be providing our rotation, but first of all we have to convert that to the motion.image right here. Okay, so now inside this animate prop, we are going to be providing the rotation, and we want that to be rotate on the 360 degree. I'm going to also provide the transition, and for this transition, let's just provide our duration of 2, and the repeat will be set to infinity. And I'm going to also provide the easing, and ease will be set to linear like so. So let's just save our file, and here you can see we are now getting the rotated logo of the framer motion. So yeah, that's also done. Let's just go ahead and perform this fourth one. So we have a skewed transition now in this case. So animate the rectangle that skews when we click on it. So create a rectangle using a Tailwind CSS, or you can also use just a simple CSS if you wanted to. And when somebody clicks on that, then skew that rectangle and return it normal when we clicked again. So yeah, once again, give it your best shot. So for this one, we're going to be creating a component with the name of skew rectangle.tsx. And I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there. Let's just go in there and register our component right here. So we have our skewed rectangle to be precise. And now inside there, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to create our motion. And let's just get there from the framer motion. And we already know that whenever we are clicking on something, so we would need some sort of a state. So I'll just create a state with the name of like is skewed, and then set is skewed. It's going to be equals to the use state. And let's just provide a true as a value to that. So now let's just make this div as a skew div. So I'm going to provide like motion.div, and inside there we have to provide a bit of styling to that. So I'm going to be using like the class name background will be set to totally yellow of 500, and also width will be set to 40, height will be set to 20. And now underneath there, when somebody try to click on there, in that situation we want to just set the isKeywed property to not isKeywed, which means like if this is true, make that false. If this is false, so make that true. So if I save my file, this is how it looks like. So if I click on there, nothing will happen. I'm gonna also provide an animation for that, so I'll just use like this animate prop and provide the skew on the x-axis. And we have to provide like if this is skewed, so in that situation we want to provide the 20 value to there. But if that's not the case, we want to set it back to 0. I'm gonna also provide a transitions right here. And for the transition, we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but just provide a duration of 0.5 seconds. Save our file, and now if I click on there, it's going to just skew it up. As simple as that. So yeah, that's also amazing. So that was our 4th challenge, and now let's talk about the 5th one, which is a combined transformation. So create a complex animation combining multiple transformation. So you just have to create some sort of a shape. It doesn't matter if there's going to be a circle or a square or something like that, and then animate that shape to move diagonally while rotating and scaling simultaneously. So yeah, give it your best shot. And I'm going to just create a component right here, the name of combine animation.tsx. I'll use my RAFCE inside there, copy the name of there, and go ahead and register their component right here, like so. I'm gonna go